So we've got our lovely panel here, all introverted women, all doing great things in their careers and their businesses, and they've had to overcome a lot of these barriers and biases that exist. And so we're going to have a discussion, and the title of the discussion is Introvert Bias, is it a myth or a reality? So first of all, if I could just ask you to introduce yourself, just a little brief overview of what it is that you do, and then we'll go into the questions. So we start with you, Sassy.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sassy Panchal, and I'm a leadership coach, and I specialise in coaching women and men who are from different cultural backgrounds. And that's been a real focus for me, because it's about having individuals who want to develop more of their leadership style, but because we're living in a global, widespread community, we need to adapt to the environment that they're working in. And I'm very passionate about making that happen for them.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenaba Fofana. I am a audit manager at Deutsche Bank, so I look after trading businesses. And I'm also the co-chair of the ethnicity network of Deutsche Bank, which I'm really passionate about. So yes, thank you.
Hello, I'm Susan Heaton-Wright, the superstar for me. I empower individuals and teams to make an impact by being creative in their performance. And what I am passionate about is making sure that everybody isn't overlooked, that quieter people still make an impact and they're recognised for how wonderful they are.
I'm Helena.
Okay. So, the first question. In the articles I write about introversion, I get women and men from all over the world sharing their experiences with me and the challenges they face. And I told you about the woman who told me about the job that she'd gone for and was told because she was an introverted, she had to justify or explain herself as to why they should employ her. So this is something that is widespread and people share their experiences with me. Have either of you ever experienced anything where you were treated less favourably because you are introverted, or you know somebody that has?
I've got an example, and it's something I thought of when you were just sitting here talking, and I've not shared it with anybody else. So I used to work in the corporate workplace for a number of years, and years ago we'd, as what happens, you get lots of reorganisation and restructuring. So we put into a new team with a new leader, a new female leader. We were all kind of brought over to the US to a meeting face to face. For personal reasons, I wasn't feeling very well during that face-to-face meeting, and because I didn't contribute, I wasn't loud enough, I wasn't speaking up. It was detrimental for me because it meant it was a hit on my performance, and performance means ratings and all that kind of stuff. So that was quite a shock to recover from.
Yeah. No, that is, yeah. And I see that a lot as well, where women are being told that their performance, it's a performance issue, but it's not a performance issue, it's just that they might not be vocal, they may not be speaking up. One woman who messaged me said to me that her manager had said that she wanted to have a chat with her about her confidence. And she said that there's nothing wrong with her confidence, she is a confident person, but just because she's not loud or speaking all the time, her manager thought that she had an issue with confidence, that there was a problem with her confidence. Thanks.
So for me, I was born and raised in France with Senegalese background, and I grew up in a family where my parents always told me you need to adapt to everywhere you go. So at first I didn't know that I was introverted, because for me I needed to adapt, and I was told that if you want to get a job you need to be outgoing, you need to smile, you need to do big gestures, and then you're gonna get the job. And it has always worked for me. It has always worked for me. Like I go and then say, those things, yeah, I can do anything. Yeah, I can do anything. And then when I get the job, I realized that, for example, at meetings I need more time. Like I can't just like say things just for the sake of it, like everyone is speaking. I need to like kind of draw back and then think a bit more deeper to basically add value. And that's where it basically hit me, because one of my managers said, "Oh, you should be more, outgoing because your work is good. So you need to show, you need to speak for your work." And I said, "Okay." And I also started to work on that and adapt myself. And so that's why I will call myself a trained extrovert, because I had to fit in at some point. And my introvert feature comes when I need my time alone, when I need to reflect. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be with myself and reflect. And that's where I get energized. And yeah, that's when I started to really realize that I was more on the introverted spectrum than extrovert, because I always thought that I was extrovert, to be honest. And then it just hit me.
Thank you.
At 17, lots of people are thinking about applying to university, and that was certainly the case for me, being brought up in Birmingham. But I was at a very highly competitive girls' school, and my form mistress wouldn't give me what was an UCCA form. That shows how old I am. You passed that. And she refused to give me a form because you're not good enough. You don't speak out in class, blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't taking that, actually. And so I went to my dad's school, because he was a headmaster at another school, and asked the secretary of the school there if there was a spare form, because they'd run out. And I completed it myself and banged on the door of the headmistress and asked her if I could apply to university. And I knew when I saw the glint in her eye that she was going to back me up. And within a week, I was being offered interviews at the top universities. And yeah, absolutely. And what's more, my headmistress described me as a quiet strength of character, for which I'm hugely grateful. And what's more, there were people that were, if I'm being honest, more extrovert, put their hands up more even if they didn't say things. And when it came to exam day, those massive offers that they got with high grades, they didn't get them. But me, the quiet person, got it.
So Carol, I was struggling a bit because there were so many examples. I didn't quite know which one to pick. So you grew up in France. I spent part of my childhood and certainly finished school in France as well. My nationality is Swedish, and in France, I'm sure you must have them here in the UK as well. They have had a lot of exams that were oral exams, verbal examinations. So my challenge there was definitely being a foreigner. Speaking a second language was a third language for me when I moved there. Being stuck in a very foreign culture, which was a very, very archaic kind of French private school system, and then being asked on the spot to answer the question, struggling with the cultural differences, struggling with the languages, and definitely above all struggling with being an introvert. I think that was quite a traumatic part of my childhood, I think, in many ways, and one that if I didn't know it before, it definitely taught me or made me think that I wasn't very good at thinking about things on the spot, which I think is not quite right. I think very fast, but when you're put on the spot under certain circumstances, it makes it extra hard. And of course, the results, the end result, what comes out is never going to be of the quality of your intelligence.
No, thank you, sir. There's a quote that goes, "Introverts think to speak, whereas extroverts speak to think." And I think that kind of sums it up quite nicely, and it's reflective of the thinking style of introverts, because we do like to think and process things and reflect and then speak, whereas extroverts, they will talk a lot and they're doing their thinking as they're speaking. The way that meetings are conducted in the workplace, it's very much about a lot of talking a lot of on the spot talking. People get asked questions and on the spot expected to make an answer, respond straight away, and you've touched on that as well. And so, when it comes to meetings in the workplace, how do you think it fares for introverts when there are meetings? In terms of that, looking at the thinking styles and the way that meetings are conducted.
I think one of the things that I found recently is that we work in a virtual meeting space, and I think sometimes it takes a lot for the person who's organising the meeting or facilitating it to really be on guard to take perspectives and who's not kind of contributing. But also I think it takes a lot of empowerment to go back and talk one-on-one sometimes with the individuals that haven't contributed. Because it's always those that have had some really great ideas, but they just weren't shared in the forum together. Because then what tends to happen is that you'll have a great idea from somebody outside the meeting, and you come back and talk about it, and then whoever's the extrovert kind of takes it on as their idea, and they've got the credit for it. It's horrible when it happens, isn't it? But I think it's just kind of taking a bit more time out for people to realise that's not fair. So we need to kind of have more equitable into meetings.
Yeah. And that is very so. Often meetings agendas are not sent out well in advance or in sufficient time for people to go through them. And that is one thing that I always recommend to my introverted clients, is to prepare for the meeting in advance by going through the agenda, thinking about the sort of things that you want to talk about or you want to question, so that you've done the thinking in advance. What about you, Diana?
So for me, so I organize a lot of meetings, and what I like to do is basically, because I know that in my team there are a lot of introverts as well. So what I like to do is do like a quick maybe catch up with the person before, and explain how the meeting is going to unfold, and say, okay, maybe you can talk about this part, and I would take over this, and this person will talk about that specific part. So in that way, everyone knows what to say or not to say, I presume, and there's no pressure or stress from everyone. So everyone knows what to do. Because I have been in that situation where I had ideas and then somebody else will steal it from me, and I was like, really? and I was like more mad at myself than at the person. I was like, why didn't you say anything? And I would just go out, of this meeting really mad at myself. I was like, you know what, you should have spoken more, and you should have told your idea, and that was great. And so now when I organize meeting, I make sure that everyone has a time to speak.
Thank you.
I'm so pleased you say that, because I think that there are two sides to the meetings. There is the people that are participating. So I agree with you, Carol, asking people to send agendas in good time and to prepare, even challenge yourself to say 3 things if you're an introvert that you know that you must say, because you're going to have that moment, hang on, they've taken that on board, and that was my idea. But also for a facilitator to really be aware of the different people that are in the room, and that you've got to give time, perhaps do one of my clients who is extrovert, she was given a task at short notice to chair a meeting with all of these CEOs, and they were all blokes, and she's quite a petite lady, and she got 2 pieces of paper, red one, yellow one. When they were talking too much, she held up, and when it was red, she actually got one bloke in the corner, she told me, not herself, but she got quite, but because he was butting in all the time and setting those ground rules. You're like, you've got a minute for this. I know it sounds a little bit like being in a classroom, but for some people that can really, really help, particularly people who are more introverted and need a little bit more time and to consider a question. So I think it's two-way, in my opinion.
And just to add a very quick comment to that, Carol, which is just something I've been thinking about, and something which disturbs me a little bit is, I think with the with technology taking over and the world becoming much more fast-paced than it ever was, the idea of people preparing agendas, the idea of people setting out expectations and ambitions around meetings is sometimes, I think it's becoming more and more rare for people to find the time to do that, and I don't see that trend stopping anytime soon. So one of the things that I spent a lot of time doing within the RBS Women's Network and with other colleagues is to actually coach people and to actually talk to introverts about ways in which that you can make life easier for yourself, because others are not always going to be as considerate as my panel, my fellow panelists say.
And yes, and so it is, if you are introverted, it's about what can you do to put yourself in the best possible position. As you said, Susan, if anybody's facilitating or chairing a meeting, they should be aware of the different people that are in the room and be making sure that they're chairing that meeting in a way that everybody gets an opportunity to say what they want to say and to voice their opinion as well.
Carol, are we allowed to ask questions?
Yes, you can, yes.
I'm just wondering about the difference between the whole intersectionality element of this, because what you've been talking about in meetings is the same kind of thing that I've experienced as a coach for women, that they get talked over, and I don't know if that's to do with them being women or whether it's about them being introverted women. What do you think?
What do you think?
So I work in bank, and I've been working in banking for 10 years, and it's really male dominated. And and we all know in a room when there's a lot of men, and when you are the only women, it seems like everything you say is not just is not taken seriously, unless you shout or maybe you do something crazy, but I think there's an element of, obviously in workplace, there's sexism. We know that there's sexism, there's racism. We all know that, and I think being introverted can also add to that, and that also comes back to the term that you use, intersectionality. Because if you stack all of that together, then you know in a meeting you are more likely to be talked over by men or someone who's louder or more outgoing. Yeah. I think that's many factors. Yes.
I would add to that if you are getting frustrated because you're being spoken over, really think about not just what you're saying, but how you say it, the non-verbal communication, making sure that you match your body language to go with the message and the tone of voice. It can be very easy if you're frustrated for the voice to go higher, and then that, for whatever reason, people dismiss that as being less valid. So almost doing what I call a Betty Boothroyd. You remember me? For those ladies of order, she lowered her voice when she was telling off the MPs, actually properly lowered it to make sure it cut through all of the noise. And that, if you can find your inner Betty in those situations, you can win it. Not being funny, but if you can just remain calm, even if you're frustrated, so that your presence and your message will cut through. Yeah.
So find your inner Betty. I think the people will remember that one. So imagine that an interview situation there you have two candidates, both got the same experience, got the same level of experience, same level of qualifications. One is introverted and who is very thoughtful in the interview, so thinking and processing through the questions and then gives an answer, whereas the extroverted person is more outgoing, makes connections straight away because of their outgoing personality and is more talkative. Which one do you think is likely to be offered the role, and what is your reason for saying that?
Can I give you a very lawyerly answer? I think that it probably depends, is what I was going to say. It depends what they're interviewing for.
Yeah.
I think there's no doubt whatsoever, like you say, in the corporate world, that there is a sort of preference for extroversion.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps not, actually, if you look into the more senior positions. I would suggest. I've talked to a lot of people about introversion since I got to know you, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
But I think certainly in the earlier stages of the career, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely extrovert.
And I think there's probably more emphasis now on interviewing, having done a few more of them in recent years, is about how you as an interviewer are looking to assess candidates, the fairer you can make that as well, through competency frameworks, through situation targets, what did you do and what was the results, those sort of things, because you're going to have to pick somebody who's going to be a good fit for your team, the organisation and the value set, but also nurturing that other person, empowering them as well. And I think there's probably more onus on the interviewer now. I would like to think that that's starting to happen.
Yeah.
I think it also depends of who is interviewing. Because I think for me, I have interviewed people who were quite quiet and thoughtful, taking their time, and I kind of resonated with that. And I also had people who were really answering like on the spot, and it was good. And I think to your point, you have to make an assessment in like half an hour whether that person is going to be a good fit for your team. And it's not enough for sure, but then you would look at how you would interact with that person, and how you would basically, how would the dynamic in the team would be. So you have to assess all of that. I don't think there's one answer to that. It depends on who and what, for what job.
Yeah.
I agree that it's related to the job, and also I know that for the person doing the interview, there is a lot more pressure on them to fulfil particular criteria so that they can justify their choice now. But I do remember going for a job, and it was within a software house, and I was in a group of introverts, and I was the only female, but I got the job. Now the job was totally unsuited to me, but because I was able to talk to the others and we did some team building exercises and things like that, for some reason they chose me, and I'm sure that was because I was the least extrovert in the group. And they felt that they were a young, dynamic, fun company, and it was not the right choice. Interesting.
Yeah, and as you say, a lot depends on the interview panel, that they are skilled to be able to, like you say, draw out to the person what they want, the questions that they're asking, make sure that the person understands, has got time to think and respond. So a lot of it is on the interview panel. If you've got a good interview panel, then they would be able to do all that. There's a study by the charity called Sutton Trust, and they found that extroverts are 25% more likely to earn over £40,000 per year than introverts. What do you think could be some of the reasons for this difference?
That is quite a difficult one, because typically that introverts don't sell themselves. So if you're looking to a job interview and you get through the hurdle of getting accepted, and then there's the negotiation about salary, there's a tendency to not push yourself forward, to ask for more, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on about, you doubt yourself, you kind of think, is that too much to be asking? So I think gradually what happens over time when you go into positions, what I found in the corporate sector is you go in, and because you've set yourself at a lower base, each time you do go up, you're not really catching up to some of the extroverts, let's say. And you never really know that until now. We're seeing more of it with the gender pay gap as well. So it's something that kind of builds up. But it's a shocking figure, but it's not surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's about selling yourself. It's about having the belief in yourself that you going in for a new job, going in for an application. You sell yourself. You sell your qualities authentically to how you are. What you've done. It's not bragging. If it's true, it's not bragging at all.
Yeah. And the thing is, with a lot of women generally don't like self-promoting because they feel it's seen as bragging and boasting. A lot of us were brought up to, you don't brag, you don't boast, and you sort of carry that into adulthood and don't like to. But as you said, it's not boasting. You're showcasing what you've done, and showcasing your achievements and your successes.
I think it's, like you said, similar to the gender pay gap. So one of the reasons why, women might get paid less than men, one of the reasons, I'm not saying that that's the only reason, is that we don't negotiate salary. As opposed to men, when they come, I want this much because I feel like I'm worth this much. We, as a woman, we don't want to be seen like, hungry, with like money hungry or like too ambitious, and because then, it's not right, and then we set ourselves a little bit lower, and then, like you said, as you go, you never catch up that gap that keeps on increasing. And I think that's the same here. When you are introvert, you feel like you're less than someone who is speaking up, like who's louder, who is extrovert. Therefore, you say, okay, I'm not worth that much. I think I'm worth a little less. And then you go to that, all the time, and it just increases. I think that's why I think that might be one of the reasons.
I'm not surprised at all, and I agree with both of you with what you've said. I wonder if the jobs that are higher paying attract extroverts, and whether extroverts are just chosen because they're right for that sort of job, and they happen to be jobs that have higher salaries than introverts. I don't know.
Yeah, without sort of unpacking the data.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Helena? Anything to add?
I mean, I agree with everything that you said, and I was just looking around the room, and it made me think of networking. So networking tends to not be the friend of the introvert. They like to sort of, unite separately in our own homes. So thinking about networking events, we all know the value of networking and the benefits that they can bring, but when it comes to networking events, and I'm going to bring in your intersectionality here as well, men tend to have less care responsibilities, so they tend to, or fewer care responsibilities, so then they tend to be the people who are able to go out and be out and about at networking events. Introverts tend to kind of, let's be honest, I used to absolutely suck at them, I used to hate them, I used to never really go out at all. But actually, by not doing that, you're actually missing out on so many other opportunities. So I think it's more than just a sort of individual. I think it's the aggregate of everything that, together, including not turning up for networking events.
Yeah, and in terms of what you say about networking, so when it comes to networking, introverts typically prefer to have fewer, more deep and meaningful conversations, where extroverts typically like to work the room and speak to as many people as possible. And when you are working the room and speaking to as many people as possible, then you're probably connecting with more people and more opportunities. And there's nothing wrong with just connecting with fewer people and going more deeper. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's just sort of being mindful. If you think about what you want to get from networking, you'd be mindful of that. Yes, Patricia?
I'm interested, if I may, to see what the ladies think of this. I look back and see where I've come from in my career, and I'm sure it must be the same with a lot of people. Started off fairly quiet, and really worked extremely hard, head down, constantly getting on. So very introvert behaviour, and I'm actually naturally completely the opposite. So I'm very much out of my shell, so I'm a natural extrovert. And interestingly enough, I was going to ask you, I know how I've found things, and I've found that the more I've gone out and networked and done all the other things I've done, I feel as though I am much more successful in doing that. Now I'm just going to say, just putting it to you ladies, do you find that you're working extremely hard at times, maybe harder than the introverts, or are you finding it very much the same, or have you found it the same in your career? Or is it just maybe a case, I could be attributed to being young and inexperienced and thinking really you've got to work hard. But as I say to you, as I've become my natural self, I don't find I'm having to work anywhere near as hard as I used to have to.
What's the question? Do introverts work harder than extroverts?
Do introverts feel that they have to work much harder? Or is it the case that no, it may not be the case? I feel as though as an introvert, I work just as hard as an extrovert. As I say, personally, I've tried both. I've tried to be very reserved and everything else. I've actually tried to be the opposite in my life, in my early life, and found, God, that was hard work. And not just trying to be different, but really finding that I really had to work hard to try and show that I made a difference instead of just walking into the room and just chatting away, and all of a sudden, there we go.
Just a very quick answer from me on that. I think those of you in the room who know me will know that I work insanely hard, but I don't think that I do that so as to necessarily impress others. But for me, it's just I'm not happy unless I feel like I've done a good job of it, unless I've satisfied myself.
So I used to think that if I work hard and only work hard, my work would just speak for itself, and everyone would see, and she works hard. She stays always late. She's the first to come. She's the last to leave. She will get there. Well, no, it's not that, because I could see people who don't even do half as I do, and they just like go up, so fast, because they go to those drinks with the important people. They have stuff to talk about. They talk about, I don't know, cricket or things that don't, I really don't like. I really don't like to work just for the sake of it. If I don't have anything important to say or something we can connect on, I'd rather not talk to you, because I don't want to talk about the weather. So I want something that's meaningful that we can learn together. But I had to adapt somehow. I had to go to those network sessions, but I would do it in a smart way. I would not try to speak to everyone, but I would speak to people like 5 seconds. If I can sense that the conversation is going to be dull, I'll be like, okay, I need to get a drink. But and then if I find someone where we really connect on something, on a topic that's really important for both of us, then I can spend all the night talking to that person. And so I had to adapt. I had to go to those networking events. I also have to sell my work. Like if I do something, I make sure that my boss or the boss of my boss knows. So I will go to his office and say, hey, did you see my presentation? And he was like, what? Well, the presentation that this guy showed you, well, that's so then that's how I get, because I was like, you need to be fearless sometimes, and I don't want to be held back because I don't speak, and I have to speak. So
yeah. Thank you.
Another question.
Yeah.
Just about those figures that you quoted about the salary.
Yeah.
Do you know whether introverted men fall into?
I mean, I think it was just a variety of people, men and women. So I don't think it was just women.
Okay.
When you put the term high energy into a search of jobs advertised on LinkedIn, it returned 5,681 jobs that were advertised. When you think of the term, someone who is high energy, what comes to mind?
Probably somebody who's got lots of bounce and it's very loud. And typically, to me, it's very much somebody's an extrovert. So if I was looking at that job description, knowing my personality, knowing who I am now, I wouldn't go for it because I would not be comfortable being, because I think in the corporate world where I've been over 20 years, a little bit to your question that you were saying there, working incredibly hard and being somebody I wasn't because I wanted to fit in, I wanted to get ahead, I wanted to be in with the crowd and move ahead. But now I would look at those and I can say now with little confidence I would not want to go for those positions because it's almost like if you've got to spend so much of your energy in the day being somebody you're not, aligning to somebody else's values, somebody else's beliefs or whatever, you slowly become so distance from who you authentically are. And as an introvert, I think the more you hold on to your authenticity and show that with more courage and more stamina and resilience, that really makes the difference. So by putting something like that, I think companies are kind of not kind of clicking onto the diverse pool of people there are in that introvert group.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, sometimes things become buzzwords and they're used without really giving a lot of thought to the meaning behind it. You know, a lot of jobs that have the word high energy, does it really need to have that? No, that's what I'd question. Anyone else got anything to say on that?
I would be put off by that job, and I would be thinking, oh my goodness, that's going to be such a noisy environment. You know, and not being able to get a word in edgeways with the big personalities that are all big and successful. And it would just not appeal to me, to be honest.
Yeah, and where that term is used, as a 5,681 jobs, that's a lot, isn't it?
Yes.
It is a lot. And so if you're saying that you would look at that and you'd think, no, you're not applying for it, that means there's going to be thousands of others, people who are introverted, that wouldn't go for something like that. So as you say, it means those organisations are not really being diverse, are they, in their thinking?
I think I just want to add something. It's just like the job description where you read able to think on his feet or whatever, and I'm like, so first of all, I'm French, so I was like, what does that mean? I had to look for it, and I was like, well, I mean, you know, what if you can't do it now, but then, you know, you actually are someone who's intelligent and very switched on, but at that particular time, you know, you need just time to gather yourself and gather your thoughts. And I was like, okay, no, that's not for me.
That's true.
So, the title of this discussion is Introversion, Myth. Is it a myth or a reality? What do you think? Introvert bias, sorry.
I think having lived the reality of what it has been like, I would say it's a reality, it definitely is. Myths are something that you can kind of pull together and kind of pull a cloak over to say it's not really happening, but actually I think it is, and the more we speak up about it and the more, I mean, I'm seeing now there's more inclusion of different diversity, whether that's diversity of different thought, different diversity of ethnic grouping, gender, male, female. But I think the more that you bring that to reality and put it in the spotlight, that's the only way change is going to happen, and change for the better as well. Yeah. Because there's so much talent in that introversion pool that I was saying earlier, that it just feels like it's being abandoned somehow, and you don't feel empowered to move forward.
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, definitely in banking, extroversion is celebrated and rewarded. The louder you are, the more successful you look, and you should be taking up all the space. You should be loud. You should be walking with your chest up, and so that's the kind of behavior and kind of attitude that is put forward. I wouldn't say it's a myth. It's definitely, extroversion is what is put forward in the corporate world, I would say.
I would agree with that. It's reality. The measures, some of the things that are really valued, particularly within the corporate world, are things that are easier for an extrovert to demonstrate. And we have to be wiser than that to be able to look beyond those particular stereotypes and those measures to get real talent and for everybody to be valued.
Anything to add?
No, I agree with everything that's been said.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it's something that I think probably all of us, you sort of live it all day, every day. You get better and better at managing it with experience. You pick up tips and tricks. But absolutely, something I see every day.
Okay.
And I want to add something else. I think if you are introverted as well, it's also up to you to kind of show what is your preferred style. So if someone is asking you a question and you're not ready to answer, you should say, well, give me some time. I can come back to you, or you can take your time before you answer. There's no pressure, so you also have to communicate that to the world and say, well, I'm not like you, but I have something valuable to say, but that needs more time, and that's who I am.
Yeah. When I was speaking to people as part of my research in my book, there was one vice president. She said that when she went into an organisation, she said to people that if you want me to make a decision, if you give me something and you want me a decision there and then, I'll give you one, but it's not necessarily going to be my best decision. If you want me to give you my best decision, then you have to wait. And I think that was a great way to set the tone so that people would then respect that and realise, well, that is her preferred style, so they wouldn't just drop things on her and expect a decision there and then. Right, so I'll just hand over to the audience if you've got any questions before.
Do you think there's any difference between males and females as to the percentage that are introverted?
I think it's probably about the same, because I do get a lot of men that contact me, even though my book is for women. I do get a lot of men that contact me. They respond to the questions on my articles and so forth. And there was one young man who, this was about 3 years ago, who contacted me through LinkedIn. He worked for, I think it was an investment bank he worked at, and he was a young black guy, and he said that he would go to meetings. He was introverted. He would go to meetings, and he would be the only black guy in the room, the only one that's not Oxbridge educated, and the only one who's introverted. And he was wanting to go for senior positions, but he felt that was a stumbling block for him. The fact that he wasn't Oxbridge educated and he wasn't white as well, and so it was just by coaching him on, as you said, how he can adapt in the meetings and how he can prepare himself in advance so that he can do his thinking and reflecting beforehand, and things like as well connecting with people before the meeting so that he's built up that rapport with them. So when he's in the meeting, it's easier for him to then engage in conversations with them.
So we've talked about introverts and extroverts. I used to think I was an extrovert, but I realised last year that I'm an ambivert.
Yeah.
We haven't dealt with that.
Yes, and that so if you think of introversion and extroversion on the spectrum, introversion at one side, extroversion on the other side, and we all fit somewhere in between. And some people have a preference for the centre, which are ambiverts, like Pastor Peter over there. He's my pastor, by the way. And some of us, depending on the environment and the situation they're in, will be at different places on that spectrum. And as I've mentioned, so you could be in an environment where you could be an introvert and you're in an environment where you feel very comfortable, you feel full of energy, and so you might be the life and soul of the party. But then it might be the case that if you're in such an environment for so long and it's overstimulating, you'll start to feel drained.
Picking up on that point, and I did want to say that not all extroverts are loud. They don't all shout.
Yeah.
It's just that they're just interested in people. And some of that is because they don't want to talk about themselves. Well, let me speak for myself. I'm more interested in other people, but you asked me what, I do this and, you know, but I just want to say that all the stuff that you were talking about and the strategies that you have suggested would apply to anyone who has been perceived as being an extrovert. But it's not always someone who's loud and, how are fire. That's not, you know what I mean? That's just very loud, but that doesn't mean that they always have those extrovert tendencies that we expect.
Yeah, and as I said, it's on a spectrum. So you could have someone who's very, very far, who's loud, blah blah blah. You could have on the introvert side at the very far end someone who is really inwards. Yeah.
Can I ask how I have to do that just to get in here? In all your workplaces, there's a lot of things about diversity. Whether you're black, you're a woman, you're single, you're what, there are lots of them now, and we're all in a very crowded playing field. How is, and you're having to fight your corner, how is the introvert fighting their corner within the workspaces for each of you, or any of you, to actually have a voice, be respected, in order that you can start to be included and considered when decisions are being made?
How does the introvert fight?
Yes. How is it coming across that things are changing? You know, we've seen changes for women. We've seen changes for race. We've seen changes for disabilities. Now, the introvert is another thing that has to be dealt with now. How is that coming through?
Do you know, just a comment on that, I think it's a really, really interesting subject. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really interesting subject, and I'm very pleased to say, Carol, that next week I'm going up to one of our senior leadership conferences, and this is exactly what I want to talk about. Because, like you say, there are many different protected characteristics out there. You have the Equalities Act. There's been so much work done in this space, and that is, of course, brilliant. In all of them, we will say we've made loads of progress, and that's fantastic, but we're still not there. But for me, the sort of things that interest me the most at this point in time are things that are hidden, things that are not necessarily visible, at a quick glance. So if we talk about introversion, if we talk about social class, if we talk about people who may be on a spectrum of some description, but are still absolutely perfectly capable of functioning and functioning in society and doing their job well. And I think your question is a really good one. How do you actually address this? And I fundamentally think that it is going to be, and coming back to what you said about intersectionality again, it's going to be very much an individual choice about finding methods and tricks that work for you as a person. Myself, right, so I am an introvert and need time. I don't tend to speak very well if I'm put on the spot, thinking on my feet. But at the same time, I've done it enough, so I practice and I practice and I practice, and it's almost like you have stock answers to these sort of questions. But that's what's worked a lot for me, is sort of making myself really uncomfortable, really, really embarrassed, and probably screwed up zillion times along the way. But I'm not sure, that is necessarily going to be what works for the person next to me.
But in your answer, you're still leaving it to the individual to fight his corner, whereas although it begins with the individual, say the race thing, it became a movement, and with something like what you're saying, you're wanting it to be recognised within the company so that it's incorporated as a consideration, because you may have 50% introverted, 50%, what happens to them, I'm just
exactly, but I think one thing, you're absolutely right, and I do think that it's probably harder for others, for people with these sort of hidden characteristics, sort of unite publicly. But what is similar, I think, across all of these sort of facets of diversity, is that we need advocates and we need champions and we need to educate people and we need to talk about it. And that's why these sort of events are so wonderful.
Yeah, and that is one thing I do in my writing. I do challenge people's thinking, challenge the bias, and help to increase awareness.
I think the one good thing about it is that it's not broken up by colour, any of the other protected characteristics, because it can flow with.
That's right, it transcends everything. Yeah. Right, just one more question.
Yeah, I just want to follow up actually from that conversation. How much is it related to performance measures and how performance measures are developed? Because is it about doing a great job, or is it about being really funny and outgoing? And I'm really interested to know where the leadership from that comes from in terms of assessing people's performance. I think someone mentioned an example where the performance was not rated highly. I don't know if it was a story that you were saying.
Yeah,
So
and that particular example gives a reference to how if you're predominantly in an extroverted environment, that performance system and the ratings that go with it and what you're supposed to do is evidence to say, you know, you've done this many things. If you've done all of the hard work, like we were saying, you put all the effort in, but it hasn't been seen or perceived to be extroverted characteristics, or others haven't seen evidence of it, then that's what happens. And I think over time that can get quite debilitating as well. And I think the whole performance system needs to be updated with what we've been talking about here today, because that's the only way, and pointing to the other lady with the question, that's the only way that change is going to start to happen, and not be seen as performance graded on your visibility in a meeting, what you've said. Like I've said, I was put down because I didn't speak up in a meeting, and that might be because everything that was being said had been said already. But then equally it's the stuff that doesn't get said that's equally as important, that could shift and create more change. So yeah, I agree, it needs to change, but how that trickle starts is another thing.
Hi, Carl. I know you said no more questions, but I just want to say thank you for bringing this to the forefront. I really can't thank you enough, because I had to start rethinking, especially in boardrooms and stuff, the people who don't speak up. And you're right about so much aspect, perceiving that they're just not participating enough, performing enough, all those things. I just want to say well done, well done.
Thank you. Well, give a big round of applause to our panel. Thank you, ladies. I hope that has helped to provoke your thinking, and will give you something to reflect on, some food for thought. Thank you.